Hey everyone, welcome back to Room 237 as I continue my reviews of crime, gangster, mob, mafia films. And this is another true crime one. Probably go through, it's going to be a number of those because those ones are my favorite out of all of them. And this one is definitely in my top 5 true crime drama gangster flicks. And it is the 1995 Martin Scorsese epic Casino, which is considered by many, including myself, to be a sister film to GoodFellas. And for a number of reasons. I mean, both directed by Scorsese, which he co-wrote the screenplay of Nicholas Pileggi, although different than GoodFellas, because GoodFellas is based on Pileggi's book, Wise Guy. With this, Pileggi wanted to write the book first and then base the movie on it, but Scorsese convinced him to write the screenplay first, and then while he did the film, Pileggi could write the book. But the film still says adapted from a true story. Stars Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci, as with GoodFellas. Takes place roughly around the same time. The main events between roughly 1973, 1983, with a little bit before and after. It's a mob film. Very extensive, and then a lot of just the technical aspects, like a lot of voiceover narration, very lengthy soundtrack, very gritty, but realistic, brutal violence. I would say this movie's more brutal than GoodFellas. So I definitely consider it a sister film, only this is done more like an epic. I mean, it's a 3-hour runtime. It's definitely more of like the Shakespearean tragedy, similar to what Godfather as a whole is. It's definitely more of a tragic rise and fall story. It is on a much bigger scope. Back home, as they refer to, is the Chicago outfit. So we have, Chicago, Vegas. It's definitely all the way up to the top, all the way down. It's GoodFellas was more so one guy of one crew with supporting people around him. We don't really see the big families in GoodFellas. This is still the top of the operations, which I love this tagline, no one stays at the top forever. But it also just feels more like an epic. The opening and closing music, which I think it's like Matthau's Passion, which translates to Matthew's Passion. It's a very epic sounding a biblical piece of music. I think about like St. Matthew's arrival to heaven or something to do with hell. I'm not quite sure about the piece of music, but if you look it up, it's a very epic piece of music. Now, the true story I'm not as well versed in as I am with GoodFellas, but back in the early 70s, all of Vegas was run by the mob in some way. Every family had a casino or a resort, or a number of them. They had their hands in it everywhere. And with this, I'm sort of going to go through this same idea with GoodFellas. I'm not going to go plot point by plot point, because I think that's been done before. I mean, a lot of people might... I'm sure there's some people that consider this superior to GoodFellas because of its scope and how much bigger it is. I'm still more of a GoodFellas fan. And like when I say this is inferior, it sounds like I think it's sophomoric or poor. That's not it at all. But I don't, because this movie more is just how things work in the day-to-day life of the rise and fall. I don't really see a point in going into plot point, like every step by step what happens, like beat for beat. But Robert De Niro plays this guy, Sam Ace Rothstein, who we get the idea he's a master gambler. He's very, he's almost like Rain Man with odds and statistics, make money on any bet. And that's how he gets involved with the mob. At first, it was stuff like horse races and stuff like that. Gets in with the mob, and then they decide to give him the fictional Tangiers Resort Casino to run, which is Teamsters funded, so that they can have, which was this big operation called the Skim, where they pool in millions of dollars, and then they just skim a few million off the top before taxes, send it back home to Chicago. Everything's fine. So they leave that to De Niro. Joe Pesci plays a maid enforcer named, I almost said his real name, Nicky Santoro, make sure everything goes smoothly. And Sharon Stone plays the hustler, I guess former prostitute, turned socialite, Ginger McKenna, who is unpredictable and really just sends everything spiraling downward until it all blows up. That's basically the framework of the movie. And it is, I mean, it's Martin Scorsese. It's going to be a brilliant film regardless, but especially when it's this kind of material, the gangster mob life, it's going to be really good. And it is very good. I love this movie to death. I remember the first time I saw it. Again, it is 3 hours, but it's not one of those movies where I feel 20, 30, 50, 60 minutes could be cut out. I feel like it does utilize every one of those 3 hours. And actually, my girlfriend got me this for Christmas. Actually, I'll go through the rest of the supporting cast. There's a role by Kevin Pollack. James Woods plays like a hustler pimp named Lester Diamond, who was Sharon Stone's ex-boyfriend that she keeps going back to. Where GoodFellas had Henry Hill as the advisor for the whole film, because that's what GoodFellas and Wise Guy is based on. The technical advisor of this film was a guy named Frank Collada, who, similar to Henry Hill, he went into witness protection, became FBI informant, and now, he passed away, I think this past July, complications to COVID, but he was very prominent in the gangster world. He, he did mob tours in Vegas. He had his podcast, Coffee with Collada. My girlfriend bought me this. It is a legit autograph, Frank Collada. That was the mugshot when he, shortly before he became a government witness. His character is played by Frank Vincent, who was Billy Bats in Goodfellas. He plays the, except in this, it's Frank Marino, who's the right-hand man to Joe Pesci, which in real life, he was the right-hand man to Joe Pesci's character. So now that there's the framework of the film, this one seems to be more fact-based as far as events than Goodfellas. But this one, where it says adapted, it does create more of like the fictional side to it. Because like Goodfellas, everyone but Henry and Karen Hill had a different last name. In this, everyone has a completely different name. For example, Robert De Niro's character, Sam Ace Rothstein, is based on Frank Lefty Rosenthal. Joe Pesci's Nicky Santoro is based on Anthony Spilotro. Frank Collada is Frank Marino. Ginger McKenna is Geri Magee. What was Lester Diamond? I can never remember his real name, like the real Lester Diamond. Geri Magee. I'll just click on her name. I should have done this before. Like I said, I'm not as well versed in this true story as I am GoodFellas. High school. Lenny Marmer. Okay, so that's the real Lester Diamond, James Woods. James Woods is in a few scenes, but it's James Woods, so he's awesome. The casino manager is played by Don Rickles. I love Don Rickles. Alan King as Andy Stone. This is back to cast, not who is who in real life. But anyway. And a lot of what made GoodFellas work, or... Actually, I was talking about real life stuff. Let me start over. 11 minutes in, I don't want to start over. But, so a lot of what made GoodFellas work, I feel like this movie was more... It worked for this. Let's just kick it up to 11. For example, voiceover narration, which is something that's not new to Scorsese, or wasn't new to Scorsese. He'd done it before, Taxi Driver. But with GoodFellas, you had that voice, Henry Hill's personality. It really helped punctuate a scene, or really kind of sort of put an arm around you and kind of let you in on like a little secret about this lifestyle. With this, the voiceover is very extensive. I mean, the first hour, like literally the first hour, is the goings on of a mob run casino. I mean, it feels like the first hour, like talking about the behind the scenes of running this kind of casino, it feels like the most vulgar episode of like Discovery Channel's How It's Made. But you have voiceover by De Niro, Pesci, and one scene with Frank Vincent. That was actually kind of cool. And then, of course, Joe Pesci was the loose cannon in GoodFellas. Loose cannon, crazy psychopath, wild, the loud guy. With this, he is completely unleashed. And while the real Tommy DeSimone was like over 6 feet tall, and Joe Pesci looked nothing like him, he could just act like him. Anthony Spilotro and Joe Pesci look just alike. And yeah, like, I think this is the role. Even though GoodFellas is my favorite performance by Joe Pesci, I will say Nicky Santoro is the role Joe Pesci was born to play. And also, Joe Pesci has... I read somewhere that he has two different colored eyes, brown and blue. And he just wears a contact in the other one so it matches. GoodFellas, it was brown. With this, it's blue. I mean, he has very blue eyes in this film. Towards the end, he has like this streak of white going through his hair, which the real Tony Spilotro did. So even though names were changed, like full names, sort of create this, I know I sound stuffy. So even though names were changed to create this sort of fictional, it's sort of the absolute exterior of the story. You know, because in real life, Lefty ran 4 casinos and resorts. He ran 4. Here, it's just the Tangiers, the fictional Tangiers, because they wanted to really focus it more on one location, I guess. But I guess everything else was very more accurate as far as events. I mean, some things have come out more recently, like spoilers, the death of Joe Pesci in this. Some news came out within the last 20 years that's different. That's not really what happened, which is very interesting. The death of this one Irish mobster, McCarthy, which in the film, Joe Pesci talks about how he tortured him for 2 days and 2 nights, stuck ice picks in his balls, eventually puts his head in a vice and cranks it till his eyeball pops out. That all really did happen. He did do that to a guy named McCarthy. But it was in 1962 Chicago, not in Vegas, between the 70s. In real life, because I think Lefty went to Vegas, I think in like 69, 68, 69. Married Geri in 69. Spilotro went down in 71. But even the structure of the film, like in GoodFellas, we have the death of Billy Batts as the opening of the film. Then we cut all the way back, work our way forward, and move on. With this, I guess originally, the opening was going to be the scene where Sharon Stone, drunk and high, is out on the lawn in the morning, and her and De Niro are arguing. That was going to be the beginning of the film. And then it was going to start over. It was going to have the credits start over, which the credits were done by Saul Bass, who also did a lot with Hitchcock. Scorsese was a big fan of his. He did GoodFellas. He did Cape Fear. But Scorsese thought there was too much going on, and there wasn't enough context to the scene. So he changed it to the part where Ace, I'll just say Ace for Sam or De Niro. He walks out of a restaurant to his pink 80s Cadillac, gets in, starts it, and it blows up. And then we get the Saul Bass credits over fire, explosion, and visuals of casino and signs with like a little dummy, obviously, of Scorsese flying, Ace flying through the screen. It's supposed to look like a person entering hell. Which, that sequence in this whole movie is the basis for the 1998 parody spoof film Mafia. Which, I really do like this film. It's crapped on a lot, but Casino, along with the first two Godfather films, are the main story parodies of this. And there's some great jokes of Casino in that. Which that really did happen. Lefty was car bombed in 1983. Or 1982 in real life. But this says 1983. And then we go all the way back to, back home, him going to Vegas, work our way forward, then we get the aftermath after, once we catch up. And even though the first time I saw this, I thought Joe Pesci was really over the top. Like, it really just felt like GoodFellas kicked up to 11. And he didn't make this right after. Scorsese didn't do this right after GoodFellas either. I mean, he did Cape Fear, Age of Innocence, and then I think he did this. But the more I watch it, I mean, I loved it the first time I saw it, but it's one of those, the more I watch it, the more I appreciate it. Wow, sorry. All the performances are absolutely amazing. The only one to get any real major recognition was Sharon Stone. Won a Golden Globe, nominated for an Oscar. And I will say, she deserved it. Sharon Stone did a wonderful job. I will say, it's one of those things where I absolutely despise her character. I really do. I really hate her fucking character. But I love her performance. The only other time I can say that would be Jennifer Lawrence in American Hustle. Love her performance, hate her character. But it takes a very strong actress to do that. And actually, in Brad Jones's review for American Hustle, he says Jennifer Lawrence is a lot like Sharon Stone in this, as far as unpredictability, really being a liability, and sort of bringing the world down around the main character. American Hustle is one of my favorite movies of the last 20 years. I will get to that eventually. I will say the soundtrack, although extensive, probably just had more songs than GoodFellas. I don't think it's as strong as GoodFellas. The songs don't always fit as much. I mean, the first song when we first see Sharon Stone, and she's slow motion walking through the casino with De Niro, just love at first sight. That song works. My favorite would be House of the Rising Sun. I'll get to the soundtrack. So yeah, going back to voiceover. I'm sorry these reviews are not as structured as, say, my typical horror movie reviews. I'm still getting used to how to do movies like this. But yeah, the first hour is all almost nonstop voiceover. It does slow down as it goes on. But I guess most of the dialogue between Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci was mostly ad-libbed. Like Scorsese would tell them what the scene is pretty much about, what they're supposed to be talking about, and then they just went for it, which is incredible. Because, I mean, there are some scenes between these two that... This actually has my favorite scene of just the two of them with dialogue, and that is the meeting in the desert towards the end of the film. Because basically what keeps this movie going is, you know, Robert De Niro is running the casino. The Skim is going great. Joe Pesci is being the enforcer. But he gets a little antsy. He wants to do some things of his own. Forms the Hole in the Wall gang, which he really did do, with Frank Collada, or Frank Marino, played by Frank Vincent, where they would go to places like jewel places with like a truck, knock a hole in the wall, go in, steal all the jewels. That was their way of bypassing alarms and stuff. And it was unsanctioned robberies, so he wasn't supposed to be doing it. Brings down all this heat onto Ace, Chicago, the whole skimming operation. All the while, Ginger, played by Sharon Stone, marries Robert De Niro, even though she doesn't love him. He just offers her security and a way out. And throughout the whole movie, she just keeps going back to James Woods. After that first encounter, De Niro has her beat up, and then she falls deeper into alcohol and drug abuse. And it just keeps going down that rabbit hole. She's untrustworthy, unpredictable, unbalanced. And to the point where, like, De Niro literally just is, like, shaking his head, like, I don't know what to do with this woman. Even kidnaps their child to run off with James Woods. Now, in real life, Lefty was very possessive of Geri, but he had infidelities on his side as well. Yes, he did have her carry a beeper, call her all throughout the day, wanting to know where she was. She already had a child of her own with Lenny, Lester Diamond. But then they had two of their own together. But the film just has one kid, which is fine. And eventually she just wants to get to her safety deposit box that has all her jewels and cash so that she can just leave. But Robert De Niro loves her too much, won't let that happen, to the point where she even wants to hire a hitman to come and kill him. She starts an affair with Joe Pesci, which Geri did have an affair with the real Anthony Spilotro, who this movie makes it seem like they've been best friends for like 35 years, which, yeah, they were good friends in real life. And then eventually De Niro finds out about the affair, which, well, actually she tells him. But the mob doesn't like affairs, especially amongst themselves. And so then he screws it up with her, and then he gets in a bad position. And it all comes tumbling down. I mean, the movie does get really intense with that. Like, they're constantly watching Joe Pesci. and he's just so leisure about it and more of like an FU to the feds that is bringing heat down on Robert De Niro. Now, in real life, Lefty was more composed and calm. Like when he had the very biased denial of his gaming license, which that's the thing, he's running a casino without a gaming license. And then in the movie, he fires the guy played by Joe Bob Briggs. His brother-in-law is county commissioner, asks him to get the job back. Ace says no. So then he sees to it that, you know, it comes out he doesn't have a gaming license. We're going to deny him that and run him out of town. That's all about the midpoint of the film. Him having his hearing to get a gaming license, which is a unanimous no. He goes on this angry tirade. But in real life, Lefty was actually very calm and composed, almost boring during that whole courthouse bit. But Robert De Niro is very extensive in his research, so all of his very flamboyant wardrobe choices, like all pink suits, all turquoise suits, Lefty really did wear. And again, God, Joe Pesci really does look like Spilotro. And then eventually, the movie doesn't go into Collada really getting arrested and then being shown the tape of Spilotro saying, we got to clean out our dirty laundry, meaning we got to kill somebody, Collada. And then him becoming a government witness. It doesn't go into that. But, but that's basically, I mean, I know I'm condensing a 3-hour movie as far as events and stuff. And then the very end of the film is, you know, all the Chicago bosses get arrested. There's this long montage of them killing off anybody that could testify. One of the hitmen is played by Frank Collada himself. And then we get the death of Joe Pesci, which is the most violent scene in the movie. I would argue possibly the most violent scene of any Scorsese film. And then we see we see Ace in like 1995, San Diego, sort of handicapping for horse races for people back home. And it's very somber. Like, it's a very depressing movie, at least for me. Just the way the music is with that final scene. He's got the big George Romero glasses. He says, you know, I can still pick winners, can still make money for all kinds of people back home. Then he takes off his glasses and he just kind of... Then it's like... And during that voiceover he says, and why mess up a good thing? And that's that. And he just kind of looks up at the camera, fades out, sad, sad, sad music comes on. It's very depressing. Especially once you consider no one stays at the top forever. Just, he was at the top. We saw his house he lived in, his suits, his rings and watches, and, you know, just, he was at the top. And now we get the idea, he actually, the scene opens up with him saying, and I wound up right back where I started. Why mess up a good thing? And then that sad music. I always thought the ending was very depressing. And after the death of Joe Pesci, for all the heat he brought to Vegas, the unsanctioned robberies, the affair with Ginger, or Geri in real life, everything Joe Pesci did throughout this film, he does get hit, which I'll get into. And then we get footage of the real-life rebuilding of Vegas, where all these mob-run casinos and resorts are blown up, leveled, and then they rebuilt it for the sort of family-friendly attraction kind of Vegas. put to that epic biblical piece of music from the opening credits, with the narration by Robert De Niro just saying how Vegas doesn't care anymore. And like Goodfellas and Wise Guy, the voiceover does have the voice and personality a lot that's in this book. I mean, one of the pieces during that last one of the last voiceovers, or the voiceover during that scene of the deconstruction and rebuilding of Vegas, Robert De Niro says, well, in this, Las Vegas has become an adult theme park, a place where parents can take their kids, have a little fun themselves. He says, today it looks like Disneyland. But then he does say, while the kids play cardboard pirate at the Treasure Island Casino, he doesn't say anything about jousting with knights at Excalibur. He does say, mommy and daddy can drop the mortgage money and Junior's college fund on the slots. So there is a lot of, same voiceover, personality, and voice in both film and book, which I appreciate. And just like with that music and just how Vegas just isn't what it used to be anymore, it is very much a lamentation. It is like, where did all the money come to rebuild all those casinos? Junk bonds. And just, talks about back in the day, dealers knew your name, what you played, what you drank. They really knew you. Today, if you order room service, you're lucky to get it by Thursday. Or, like today, it's like checking into an airport. Really laments on just how Vegas just let itself go. It's not as tightly run as it was back then, even with the mob behind it. Which in real life, Lefty did do some things that doubled the casino's profits. He brought in beautiful female dealers, which had never been done before. That doubled profits. He was there's a scene with blueberries. He gets mad that his muffin doesn't have as many blueberries as sort of, I think it's the guy that does all the funding. So he takes the muffins, goes into the kitchen, and he says, equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. He really did do that too. The female dancers at one of the shows, if they were a pound overweight, he'd send them back to France. He was, sort of this egomaniacal tyrant as well. He wasn't as tortured in real life, like a tortured soul like he is in this. I mean, yeah, the business part of him is much intact, but the married life, he had infidelities and stuff on his side in real life as well. Spilotro. There's not a lot on, there's a lot on Spilotro, but not like interviews and stuff like that. He was murdered in 1986. The movie doesn't really say when, but actually there's a part where, saying how he was called in like for every murder that happened in Vegas. By the time he was killed, he had between 22 and 25 murders suspected he was involved in. And there's the scene where he's in a brown suit, he's walking with his lawyer, Oscar Goodman, played by Oscar Goodman. They're sort of walking towards the camera, and like they're going across the street, and he looks at someone, he tells them like, hey, watch yourself, the car's coming. That's called perp walk. You can actually find the real footage of Spilotro in a brown suit walking with Oscar Goodman, like away from the courthouse. Pesci did his research as well. Now the movie depicts that he was killed in a cornfield, along with his brother Michael, or in the film his brother's name is Dominic, and then beaten with baseball bats, stripped down in their underwear, and then buried on top of each other in a cornfield. for years, and that was in June of 1986. For almost 20 years, actually for like 21 years, people thought that's what happened. Because about a week later, the farmer was doing farm work and he saw some freshly turned dirt, and he thought some poachers had buried some animal parts out there. So we dug it up, saw it was a person, called the authorities, and then hit the news. So for 21 years, people thought it was as depicted in Casino. But the movie depicts Frank Vincent's character, Frank Marino, based on Frank Collada, was there and the one swinging the bat, or one of the ones swinging the bats. That didn't happen in real life. The only reason why that's the case and why Frank Collada let Scorsese put that in the movie was because Scorsese said to him, "Did you once tell me that it's your best friend that will lead you to your death, not your enemy?" And he was like, "Yeah, I did say that." So it's in there for dramatic purposes, but Frank Collada was not involved with the death of Tony Spilotro, even though Spilotro was going to kill him before he became a witness. But how it came out was one of the killers got picked up by his girlfriend, and then they split up. She was going to go into, I think it was she was going to go into witness protection, testified against him, or he went into witness protection, and eventually he said, yeah, that's not what happened. So even though the movie depicts them, however it happened, the movie depicts them as killed in a cornfield, beat with bats, when in reality, the story is now they were lured into a basement, and probably in the neighboring town of Cicero or Brennanville, I think it was, is what is believed. They were led down to a basement. Supposedly, Michael was going to be made. Tony went with him, and then they were killed there and then buried in the cornfield. But either way, they were found in the cornfield, and it's a very brutal scene. And what's really unique is Joe Pesci is doing the voiceover about how it was way too hot. You know, the heat was too hot to still go back to Vegas. So we set up this meeting out in the cornfield. And while he's doing this voiceover, Frank Vincent comes up behind him with the bat, hits him like in the side of the knee, and even the voiceover goes, "Ah!" as he's hit. I thought that was pretty interesting. It's like the voiceover is being told in real time. So I thought that was interesting. Another very violent scene, that's one of my favorites, is one that's called Cheater's Justice, which is when there's this big scene where De Niro talks about how he's got all these eyes all over the place to watch for cheaters at the table. And there's this one guy who's always guessed right. I think it's Blackjack. He's always guessed right. And De Niro can tell the dealer's not in on it. And then he starts looking around, and there's a guy who's kind of peeking over and tapping his leg. You can see the dealer's card, and he's tapping a signal thing that's on the leg of the other guy's tapping Morse code. So De Niro sends for Mr. Happy, who's this guy, has a cattle prod, walks up to the guy, cattle prods him, looks like cardiac arrest. They bring him out back, rip his pants down, they see the apparatus, and then De Niro has this great scene where he's like, "Oh, I see you doing that with your right hand. Can you do it with your left?" He's like, "I haven't tried." He's like, "So you're a righty?" "Yeah." And then De Niro kind of gives the guy a look, and without any cuts or anything, he takes a hammer, because he's got the guy like this on a table, and just pounds the fuck out of this guy's hand, and you kind of see his fingers like bending and blood. Bashes the fuck out of this guy's hand, and they threaten to take a table saw to him. Then they bring the friend who's trying to flee. He's like, you can have the money and the hammer, or you can walk out of here. You can't have both. He's like, and you fucking tell all your friends that you fucked up. You don't fuck around in here. Now, I think, like with... those are the two, like, major violent scenes. Apart from the McCarthy head vice eye pop, which, again, happened in Chicago. Which they never say Chicago. I know I said this at the beginning of the video, but they call it back home. Now, like GoodFellas, I said I had a favorite scene or a favorite shot. Like a favorite scene, then a favorite scene put to music, then a favorite shot. My favorite scene in this, which is my favorite on-screen scene. If it's a scene, it's on-screen. My favorite scene with De Niro and Pesci ever, that they've ever done together. This is towards the end. This is after De Niro's been banned from getting his gaming license. He became the entertainment director of the casino. Even started like a public access talk show in the casino. I know there's stipulations as to why he did it, for fame or to call out the political people like county commissioners, for money, number of different reasons. The movie makes it look like he says it was so people can't mess with him, and so he can sort of call people out, like the Pat Webb, county commissioner. But also makes it look like he's doing it for fame because he wants to go on TV. And there's been some back and forth, like, of course, Joe Pesci getting in all kinds of trouble, bringing heat down on him. De Niro suggests to the bosses that Pesci get out of Vegas for a while, let it cool down. Pesci catches wind of that, and it actually shows with subtitles how they talk in code because of wiretaps. Like, they'll have their wives talk about shopping, and then since it's not about a crime, they click off. So then that's when they get the phone and they say, like, I got to meet you at this, this bar, which means out in the desert. I'll see you, I'll see you at 9, which means I'll see you at 6. The subtitles show what their codes actually mean. And you get this excellent scene. It's my favorite scene in the whole film, where De Niro's out in the desert waiting for Pesci. And you get the same sad music that's in the end credits as Pesci is just barreling down this dirt road through the desert. You get this great shot of De Niro's big sunglasses with the reflection of Pesci's car. And again, this was ad-libbed, but just the passion, the performance of this scene is so strong. Pesci pulls up, gets out of the car. It's just all like, the fuck do you get off telling people behind my back? Like, you want me to get out of my own fucking town? You better bring your own fucking army, pal. Then talking about going on TV, and he's like, I get fucking calls home from back home every day, thinking you went batshit. And then Robert De Niro is like, you remember when you asked me if you could come out here? What did I say? Do you remember what I said? What did I tell you? I mean, I knew you were going to come out here anyway. And of course, Joe Pesci is like, wait a minute. I asked you? When the fuck did I ask you? Great, which Joe Pesci did ask him in the beginning of the film. What do you think about me moving out here? Just that scene between those two, just giving it to each other. Love, powerful, great scene. between two great actors. But my favorite scene with the song is House of the Rising Sun, which is it opens up great with the feds knocking on Ace's door. Ace answers, and it's pictures of Sharon and Pesci, or Stone and Pesci. They're like, why protect a friend that does that to you? And he just slow motion shuts the door, opening House of the Rising Sun. And it shows all the mob bosses at their arraignment. The casinos have been shut down. They have all their hitmen going around killing anyone that can testify, including the guy that would pick up the Skim money to bring back Chicago. They caught up to him in Costa Rica, shot him. These other guys get shot, fall into a hole. Which actually, another thing that's different is the guy that kept the records of everything that happened is this guy, Piscano, who works at a pizzeria. Works at a grocery store with his mother, who's played by Scorsese's mother. And her scene is funny, because every time he's like, these fucking, she's, like, calm down. Like, the language. Which in real life, it wasn't a pizzeria. It wasn't a grocery store, it was a pizzeria. And he kept records of everything. And of course, they bugged his building. They found his notebook, and he had a heart attack in front of the feds. That happened. And that happens in this, happened in real life. But it was a pizzeria, not a grocery store. So House of the Rising Sun, everyone's getting killed. But when it shows Sharon Stone, you know, after they get divorced, she takes her money, found some pimps and drug dealers, and she was all drugged up. Like, it shows her exiting her hotel room, kind of against the wall, and kind of asking for, you know, knocking for help, and then she collapses and dies. Alcohol, coke, and Valium. Where all she had left was like 3,200 and coins. That's all she had left from like 2 million that she blew in a few months. But what I like about that is, while, you know, she's walking, the camera's pulling back as she's walking towards it while she's up against the wall. She's supposed to be all drugged up. House of the Rising Sun that's playing over it is like echoed. And it's towards the end of the song where it's like, you know, I'm going back to New Orleans to wear that ball and chain, which is my favorite line of the song. It's like all echoed and distorted. I thought that was a great choice. And then, you know, of course, that's when Pesci gets to the cornfield. As soon as he's hit with the bat, and there's the ah! It stops, and we get the beating. And then it finishes with, you know, because what leads up to that is Sam's the car explosion. Which people like to point out that in the beginning, when he gets in the car, and right before it explodes, you can see the cut from Robert De Niro to a dummy. They like to think they're like sharp eagle eyes, and they caught the dummy, or they're trying to say it was, you know, like, inferior movie. There's a dummy. Like, they're about to blow up a car, and it looks fine. And it looks just fine. Calm down. And it's an obvious shot, so it's, you know, it's there for all to see. Because right when that happens, it shows that he lived. And the reason why he lived is because there was a plate under the driver's seat that blocked the explosion. That was only exclusive to 1981 Cadillacs. Now, so after it shows him getting pulled out of the car, he says, no one knows who authorized the hit, but I think I know who lit the fuse. And then that shows Joe Pesci pulling up into the cornfield. Which actually, no. Shows the explosion, him saying that. Then after the kill, it shows him with the ambulance after the explosion. And then we get the opening opera piece with the destruction of Vegas. So House of the Rising Sun is my favorite song and sequence that appeared, but my favorite scene is the meeting in the desert. So yeah, it's crazy he survived a car bombing in real life. He actually did too. And then we see him in 1995 in San Diego with the big George Romero glasses. It sounds like he's lamenting over his life, about how he's back where he started, then the sad music, he's not at the top anymore. But I know I'm all over the place and I apologize, but so I talked about Cheater's Justice, but that scene when who played Dominic Santoro? Philip Soriano, who I guess he had a notable appearance in Lethal Weapon 2. He was also in GoodFellas as like the early 60s crew, like when we hear everyone's nicknames. He was in Mafia as well. Cool. But that scene when they're being beaten with those bats, I mean, you have like 3 guys on Dominic just pelting him with these aluminum bats. I mean, you hear the sound of the metal. And then, I mean, he's all bloodied up. They rip his clothes off, throw him in the hole. Pesci doesn't really get... I mean, we see him get hit in the head, which is like... And a lot of people like to think or dispute why it was Frank Vincent's character who was his best friend through the whole film. He does kind of talk about like how he was mistreated, belittled. He could never, he was never going to be made, even though Frank Lefty said he had been made, but there's no evidence of it. There is a scene where their boss asks him if he's seen anything as far as the affair. And he lies. The voiceover even says, but, I knew that by lying about it, I could get killed myself. I mean, that's why he's hesitant. But also, so, probably they found out he knew, and as punishment, they made him kill his own friend. The mob is famous for that. Or they're known to do things like that. But I think they're talking about the part how when he's like, you see what you did? You know, good brother? And he beats his brother while he's yelling at Pesci. You do what you can to get through a hit. People like to look way too deep into it. Like, do you think he said that because he was actually mad about, do you think he was mistreated? And this is a big F.U. to Joe Pesci. He's just getting through a hit. Like, people like to look too deeply into things. Like how some people would be like, there's a Cadillac in this. There's also a Cadillac in a movie that came out after it. Do you think there's a connection? Do you think they're inspired? No, I don't. Anyway. So, yeah. And then there's like the scene where he gets hit. We see blood pouring out. And then we get like a scene of him kind of being hit a bunch. Then he's stripped, thrown in the hole. And yes, he was buried while he was still breathing, as said in this. But the head is like, as they throw the dirt on him. That was an animatronic. I really do love this film. I do. This video is almost as long as my GoodFellas one. I will say this is definitely more of an epic than GoodFellas. GoodFellas does feel more intimate and confined, at least with who it deals with. This small number of associates of this one crew, whereas this is a whole operation, even with the top of those in charge. It is, it is probably a little like 35 minutes longer than Goodfellas. It it's more of an epic, I will say that. And it does feel like it's on a bigger scale and scope, even with its soundtrack. I used to think that the biblical piece was a little more epic than it needed to be. But the more I watch it, the more it's like, okay, this is sort of like a Shakespearean tragic, but, you know, done as a mob story. Not done as well as the first two Godfather films, but that's still what it is. And Scorsese still calls this, at heart, a love story. You know, the love story between these two, which I can see. There's just a lot of other things around it. I'm sure there's other aspects I missed. I mean, even the smallest thing people will point out in the comments, like the straw in someone's glass in that one scene in real life, that actually was a bendy straw. You didn't even mention, like, you call yourself a reviewer? You didn't even... Okay. It's in my top 5 favorite gangster flicks of all time. Always will be. I love it to death. I will say, as a sister film to Goodfellas, as far as just which one I like more, I will say it is inferior to Goodfellas. And I will say this is probably the last movie where Robert De Niro really looks like he's giving a shit. You have, like, I'll say the first Meet the Parents. That's funny. That's good. Of course, Silver Linings Playbook. He's awesome. The Irishman. He's great. But he did do a string of really bad movies. I'll say Analyze This. He was funny. But as far as just those really great, dramatic Robert De Niro roles, I will say this is the last before he really just kind of hit a wall. And this is the last time Scorsese worked with De Niro and Pesci for 24 years. I mean, The Irishman came out in 1995. But I will say this is sort of the end of an era for Scorsese. I'll say The Irishman is a return to that kind of gangster flick. Because, I mean, he did do The Departed. Wolf of Wall Street is a crime film. Not gangster, but it's a crime film. Gangs of New York is gangs as well. But they're all very different. It's a different kind of Scorsese. It does feel more Hollywood. You know, bigger casts. Just the production feels bigger. You can still tell it's Scorsese, but I feel like this is the end of this kind of Scorsese until The Irishman. I mean, once he started working with DiCaprio, which he did that with The Aviator, and so on, it really is a different kind of Scorsese. I mean, I'll say Gangs of New York and The Departed might be his most Hollywood films, at least that I've seen. Still wonderful films. I love both of them. I love Wolf of Wall Street as well. But, you know, it feels like a different Scorsese. It feels like a next evolution in just the style of films he's making. And I think, you know, I didn't really see the films in between. Like, I didn't see Kundun, I think it's called. But I think for this kind of Scorsese, why not end it with this kind of epic? I mean, a big, you know, for over 2 decades. The last film he did with De Niro, Pesci, made a gangster flick like this. Why not go this big and epic? I totally understand it. And it's fitting that the last movie he did with them, with Pileggi, which, yeah, that was the last one he did with Pileggi. Because I don't think he was involved. No, he wasn't. Well, this is more of a fictional film anyway, but... So yeah, to wrap up an era, why not have it be this big and epic? I love Casino. And I can't... When I finish Wise Guy, I'll pick this up and I'll read this. I hope my real life stuff was just as informative as my GoodFellas video. I hope it was as accurate, or I hope I'm doing well with these. I've never really structured a gangster flick review. This and GoodFellas was very hard because you have a lot to talk about. There's a lot that goes on. There's a lot of technical aspects. I will say this doesn't really have any sort of Copacabana back entry type scenes. I mean, the cinematography is great. It's shot beautifully. With Scorsese, it goes without saying. The editing by Thelma Schoonmaker, flawless as well. I will say the soundtrack is not as memorable as GoodFellas. I do really like, how House of the Rising Sun is used, the end credit music, how that's put to the meeting in the desert. Matthew's passion over the opening credits and sort of the epilogue really works. It does help set the tone for this big Shakespearean epic. And there's even a line in this book, which might be a great way to wrap it up. That's, there's a line by Joe Pesci in the opening, after the opening credits, about, it should have been so sweet. We were given paradise on earth, and in the end, we fucked it all up. Which I think is even still part of the opening credit music. So it really helps set the tone for just what kind of just tragic movie you're getting involved in. And it's never boring. Never. It's worth its 3 hours. This might still be on Netflix. This is a movie where if I see I saw there was a 4K release. This is a movie I'll get on like 4K or Blu-ray to see if it looks better. Horror movies are different. I like VHS quality of those, but this I'll get a newer version of. But yeah, one of my top 5 favorite gangster flicks. I would put this in my top, if I were to make a top 20, 25 non-horror movies, favorite non-horror movies, this would definitely be on there. I love Casino. Damn good movie. And one hell of an epic. And a great sister film to GoodFellas. So, Scorsese did it again. And it's a nice cap. It's a nice top to that era of Scorsese as well. At least in my opinion. But anyway, over an hour. I know that's going to get an automatic downvote that I keep getting on every video. But, just for the length itself. But apologize for the length. But anyway, thank you for watching.